on. I don't know where I was going with that. Statistics have been a metric of music for as long as we can remember. The numbers represented with these audible bodies of work have more recently become a topic of contention for the past few years. I don't know how many more people will agree, but it's safe to say that the shifting from record sales to streaming has been an interesting transition. Most of you watching, I assume, have basically grown up with streaming, while some watching may have had to witness what I can only assume is the absolute chaos of that transition. It's crazy to think that just 18-20 years ago, old heads were widely debating with artists like Soulja Boy. It's crazy to think that just 18-20 years ago, old heads were widely debating with artists like Soulja Boy about the utilizing of the internet using hip-hop. It's pretty crazy to think about. However, with the industry shifting away from consumer ownership in favor for subscription-based servicing, notice a growing list of shenanigans these artists have pulled in order to rack up plays. Devious decision-making, if you will. Or to be more blunt, stat boosting. Stat boosting has greatly increased in prevalence, with some of the biggest artists using various methods to do so. So I kind of wanted to talk about that, as well as who is responsible, and why these methods may not be going away anytime soon. First off, we got deluxe albums. Now, deluxe albums are nothing new, with some of the best tracks and projects having been released with their deluxe editions. However, 2020 and onward has seen a recent trend of them, and to absolutely ridiculous results. Lil Uzi dropped a deluxe version of their highly anticipated release at the time, Eternal Take, a week after the original project was released. From 18 to 32 tracks, they essentially dropped a separate project on top of the tracks we already had, which kept up the insane momentum the album was already getting. Ever since, I've started to see some of the craziest number of songs on a single release. Nav in particular is notorious for adding 14 songs to his Good Intentions project 3 days after his initial release.
3 days!
In general, there's just been an increase of songs and albums, which has both positives and negatives. Throughout the pandemic, everybody was at home cooking something or getting cooked. Especially with the likes of Lil Uzi, who at the time hadn't dropped a proper album in like 4 years, I want to say. Feeding your audience naturally gives more to enjoy. On the other hand, those pluses can heavily alter the project in unintended ways. Having the ability to make a body of work built off of all the efforts and knowledge gained from your craft is an experience like no other. So when you finally release all of that, assuming everything was properly planned, and stack more onto that initial piece, in some ways it can diminish the original impact, or in some ways purpose, to the public eye. In a lot of these deluxes, the tracks aren't even necessarily bad. How necessary is it for chunks of your album to consist of already released singles or highly demanded leaks? Which is why I wasn't too excited when SZA announced a deluxe to her latest project. Now, we all love SZA around these parts, hopefully. Her notoriety and impact on neo-soul and modern R&B should not be understated. She could have hibernated for 4 more years like Mariah Carey, and I still wouldn't like getting hit with 23 songs, with 3 being already released singles. Same with Playboi Carti, to be honest. A lot of Red's influence throughout the underground rap scene has been shocking to see the past 2 years. But him making a post a few days after Christmas asking fans for songs on the deluxe is not it. And everybody commenting nothing but 2019 leaks. At least y'all could have sent like Instagram snippets or something else. Like, these go kinda hard, I don't know. Well, not every project needs to be an auditory phenomenon of a sequence. I feel as though the emphasis on more tracks has resulted in a growing sense of fatigue on the consumer's end. Another thing I'd have to list would be official sped up versions. This has been more of a recent trend within the past few months, but it's basically a separate release of either a single or popular track with a version such as slowed down, sped up, whatever. The point is, these remixes have gone big fast within the past year. On Spotify, there's a sped up playlist with apparently over 1 million likes. A notable example would be Steve Lacy's sped up version of Bad Habit. According to an interview from The Guardian, he didn't even like the idea of releasing a sped up version in the song when his label hit him up. Mainly did it to get #1 on Billboard. At least he was honest about it. 2 weeks ago, at the time of recording this at least, SZA dropped a bundle pack of Kill Bill consisting of the original track and instrumental, vocals, and sped up version. This recent upbringing to me has been shocking to say the least. The capitalizing of such a trend with little to no effort has presumably made these companies bank. The Steve Lacy interview with The Guardian, they apparently came to him with not only the idea, the precise frequency to change the track to. Are you serious? Think about that for a second. Record labels are studying decibels and frequencies for a remix that can whip up in 5 minutes. I don't know why that's just the funniest thing. There are other examples of this too. The official counting of album sales is said to be easily exploitable with the addition of merch sales. Travis Scott and Don Toliver specifically have gone flack for this, especially by Nicki Minaj. Y'all remember that whole beef from 2018?
When she was taking slaves
to free Just a few days ago, Trippie Redd dropped his latest album, Mansion Music, or whatever it's called, with just about everybody Avenger assembling in some way on each track. But then he had the bright idea of releasing all 25 tracks separately as singles. Are you serious? And you doing all this for a projected 55K? Now hopefully I've given enough examples of what I'm talking about. But now it's time to deduce who exactly is responsible. Who exactly should be held accountable for this arguably excessive era of music? Drumroll please. It's the labels. You probably knew that already. It's no surprise that the practices of record labels are questionable at best and heinous at worst. Multiple artists like Lupe Fiasco, Megan Thee Stallion, Frank Ocean are outwardly voicing their frustrations with their business associates. The public has finally gotten a bigger glimpse into the inner workings of an artist's actual income. And depending on the deals, you're most likely getting a very small amount from the actual label. There's been talk for a while on whether tour sales or brand deals are what makes the most money, but the consensus seems to be that the label money ain't at the top. I think this great comparison would be this one clip from The Barbershop, where Aja Wilson basically explains the various amount of income made by players in the WNBA and how little of that comes from the actual league, at least in the States, unless you move overseas. Those similarities between the league and the music industry here are unfathomably morbid when put into perspective. Yeah, some of these brand deals are still crazy to think about. How did the Sweetie McDonald's collab happen? And why was this the main selling point? Camille is probably responsible for the death of thousands of toilets, and she feels nothing. Is this who we are? We didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. My stomach don't deserve. Okay, but in all seriousness, in a world where capitalism and commerce control and influence the very way art is put out today, in order to survive, most of us relying on art to live are forced to succumb to these algorithms and regulations to secure a living. Also, some labels simply hold up releases for various reasons. I think Quartz Jones's video on this topic goes into more detail, but when the company backing your product up isn't being cooperative with you, yeah, it makes complete sense to take as much advantage of your success as possible. And if that means dropping a sped up version of a track to keep those numbers up, you don't really have much of a choice, because you never know what nonsense may come next. Well, that's pretty much all I gotta say. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. Since I just started this thing, I'm experimenting a bit with content, so there should be another story time coming soon, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. If you like this content though, just let me know in the comments or on Instagram. I don't know how to end these videos, so I'll just say a random message. If you haven't already watched Abbott Elementary, okay, bye.